We don't need a quorum since this is a subject matter hearing. And this is part of the budget process, folks. So this hearing is just basically to allow folks to come before the committee, express some of the concerns they have and how the budget impasse has impacted them or their institutions. We are still working on the budget. We missed the May deadline. We were hoping to get something by the end of June. We continue working towards that. I'm hoping that with these testimonies, it helps us prioritize what the needs are and what are some of the pressure points that we need to address and address quickly. The folks coming before us today, we have LIHEAP, we have the line of duty and group health. We're going to have folks talking about the school water contaminated with lead and the Equal Justice Foundation. With that, I'm going to ask we have several people that are going to testify on LIHEAP. Let me just start out with Delisto Solomoyo, who's the CEO of the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. If you can come up here. And yes, Representative Harris. Yes, you may.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'd just like to make a statement before we start. We're here to discuss the budget situation, and we're going to have individuals testify today about the budget situation and what the impact is on them or the organizations that they work for. You know, the situation, it seems to me, is pretty clear. The inflow of revenues coming into the state of Illinois is insufficient to meet the outflow of expenditures. And you can sum that up very simply by simply saying our spending, we are spending more than we are taking in. We are accumulating debt at a rate of roughly $6 billion a year. And as we all know, our backlog of bills now approaches $14 billion. And I'm happy to hear from the people who are here today, but I will tell you straight away, we know that people are being hurt. We know that institutions are being hurt, whether they're hospitals or any sort of provider. Institutions are being hurt, and most importantly, our state of Illinois is being hurt, and it's not just being hurt, it is being financially destroyed by this budget impasse. Now, how do we solve it? Well, it seems pretty simple. Again, to me, I'm not very bright, but it seems that we need to reduce our expenditures, but we also need to increase our revenues. And there is a proposal out there to do that the Senate sent to us, which hopefully we in the House will look at and work from and build on, and by June 30th, get resolution. And I realize there are other issues, political sorts of issues, and I hope that those can be worked out so that we can get at last a budget to stop this implosion. Our house is burning down around us, and I'm not saying anything that anyone on this, any legislator on this panel doesn't already know. But we need to get a resolution. If the folks who are here testifying today add emphasis to the need for that resolution, then so much the better. But we need to get a resolution, and I hope we can move forward on a pathway that gets resolution by June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Harris. If I may add, I have a lot of respect for Representative Harris. I think that his comments were spot on. We need to come up with a solution that's based on sound public policy and not based on politics. And unfortunately, as we get closer to the election, it seems like that's what we hear nowadays. Folks are driven by politics. Hopefully, the members of this committee, myself included, will just keep looking at a solution that's based on sound public policy, which, as many of us have said, this is a math problem. It's a matter of making sure that the pluses and the minuses do balance, and that's going to take a combination of cuts and revenue. We have heard some ads out there from some folks saying that we should not raise revenue. But again, it's a math problem. But again, I appreciate the remarks and the comments, and like I said before, I have a lot of respect for Representative Harris. With that, we'll have the folks from LIHEAP come up, and if we can start with Delisto Solomoyo. And he's here with Harold Rice, who's the president and CEO for CETA. If I can just interrupt you, I just want to acknowledge someone. I've got my my intern at the office, Prachi. Where's Prachi? Can you stand up real quick? She's graduated from Barrington High School and going to second year at University of Wisconsin. I wish you were U of I, but that's okay. Thank you for joining us, Prachi. Delisto.
Thank you, Chairman
Please
Crespo.
add Representative Kidford to the roll. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Crespo. Honorable members of the Appropriations-General Services Committee. Again, my name is Delisto Solomoyo, and I'm currently the CEO of the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. In my previous capacity, I was the president and CEO of the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies, the organization that represents the community-based organizations that provide the LIHEAP services. So again, thank you for the opportunity to testify in this subject matter hearing, specifically to talk about the impact that the budget impasse would have on the families and individuals that are served by these various programs that are at risk if we don't have a budget by the end of this month. As you know, the state budget impasse, if we don't have a budget, that will affect the federally funded programs that flow through the state of Illinois. This will also affect some of the special funds, like the LIHEAP program that is funded through the utility surcharge that is collected by our regulated utilities. This will result in our agencies across the state, including the one in Champaign, being forced to turn away thousands of families and individuals that will be vulnerable by not being able to provide any services to them if we don't have the authority to spend and provide assistance July 1st. As we are now 2 weeks away from the state's fiscal year, we are concerned as agencies that if we don't have access to both state funding, which would be the either special funds or any funds that are appropriated through the General Revenue Fund, but also the federal funds that Congress has already appropriated through the end of the federal fiscal year, what we need is to have the General Assembly and the governor to work together to appropriate those funds so that we don't interrupt any services that we are currently providing throughout our communities. As far as LIHEAP, which I know is a program that we have worked together on these last couple years, it is indeed the state funding, especially now, it's very critical because, as you know, the President in his 2018 budget has proposed to eliminate LIHEAP as a program. And, you know, if we don't have the state funds available, we could find ourselves in a very precarious situation come this fall if we're not able to provide any assistance to many of the households in our state that need LIHEAP assistance. And one last thing I will say before I hand it over to Mr. Rice is that the reason we have LIHEAP is because many of our families cannot afford to pay the utilities. It's not because they don't want to pay, they cannot simply afford to pay the utilities. We have looked at studies that have indicated that most low-income households that are at the income level that is served by the LIHEAP program pay anywhere up to 30% of their income towards the utilities. So if you're on a fixed income, earning about $1,000 a month, 30% of that going towards the utilities is pretty significant. And so that's why we have programs such as the LIHEAP to assist those families to have utilities. It's a health and safety issue. And you know, in some cases, some of these resources are being collected by the utilities, and we just need to have the authority to continue to provide assistance to many of the families that need it. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman. We're very hopeful that there will be some resolution that will be reached before it's too late. As you know, it's already getting extremely hot out this summer. And I will remind the committee about 21 or 22 years ago when we had several individuals that died, particularly in the city of Chicago, due to exposure to extreme weather conditions. But it's programs like LIHEAP that help to save lives, help our seniors, veterans, and others to afford the utilities. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Rice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again,
Thank
good
you, Mr.
afternoon, Chairman Crespo. Thank you for the invitation, and also to the committee here. Representative Harris, I really appreciated your comments. They were spot on. This is a math problem, and unfortunately, caught up in the math problem, we have lives that are maybe not being calculated that needs to be part of that equation. And so, as the president of CETA, I don't want to reiterate some of the facts that Delizzo has communicated to you, but it's an issue that is affecting all of us. And CETA being the largest community action agency in the state of Illinois, where we represent about 50% of the LIHEAP clients that are being served here in the state. We're just in Cook County, but we represent about 50% of that. So it would have a devastating impact to the clients just here in Cook County, in suburban Cook County. We're talking lives, and as Delizzo had mentioned, there were about 750 lives that were lost in 1995 due to the heat wave that came through Chicago. I think I've mentioned this to this body before, 2 years ago. It's not until we lose lives that we sit down and try and put a figure to that and a solution. And I am just asking that, to indulge you, to ask yourselves, how do we figure this out, as you so accurately stated, Representative Harris, how do we figure this out before we run into a problem where we lose lives? Again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. For the benefit of the committee, let's talk about the process a little bit. I know the Senate appropriation bill, and we've had meetings with the Senate, they're looking at sweeping LIHEAP funds to close the gap.
Yes.
And we've had the administration, last year there was an attempt to do the same thing. I'm glad they did not. But let's talk about the monies coming in to the LIHEAP program. And it's a combination of federal dollars,
Right.
that although it's a pass-through, the General Assembly needs to give the administration the appropriation authority to use the money. So let's talk a little bit about the timing issue.
Sure.
Then there's the state portion of money that comes to fund LIHEAP. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we collect the dollars for LIHEAP through the state is there's a surcharge on meters, gas and electric. So utility companies collect this from the consumers, and they send that over to the state.
Yes.
And that's the money that we use specifically for LIHEAP. It's earmarked for LIHEAP. It's not supposed to be used for anything else.
That is correct.
Okay. So if we were to use LIHEAP funds that we collect through the utility companies, I've always argued that if we were to do that, we might as well just get rid of the entire program, because essentially what we would be doing is asking the utility companies to collect a tax on meters to be used for general revenue funds rather than for LIHEAP.
Exactly.
Okay. I also understand that there's a benefit to the utility companies, because obviously they use LIHEAP dollars to keep their bad debt down. So the money, they collect the money, there's a benefit to them because, again, these are folks, low income, seniors, they can apply for these LIHEAP grants to A, keep their services on, or they also issue emergency service grants to get their services restored.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
So that's how they keep their bad debt down. So if we were to use less LIHEAP money, I would imagine that chances are their bad debt might go up. Consequently, they're going to have to raise their rates to make up the difference. So this is my understanding based on my years of experience working on LIHEAP when I was manager at People's Energy. So correct me if I'm wrong, if there's something else that you need to add to that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may add a couple things to the points that you've made. First one regarding the timing with federal funds. So as I pointed out earlier, the Congress has already appropriated the 2017 budget to the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th. So what we would need is for the General Assembly to provide and the governor to agree to an appropriation so that we can continue to spend those federal funds. On the state funds, we need to have a reserve of those state funds so that we can have enough money to start the program in September, which would be the regular LIHEAP program. We start by prioritizing seniors and households with disabilities in September. If we don't have those resources as a result of those funds being swept, then we would be delaying providing assistance to those most vulnerable households while we wait to see what Congress is going to do based on what the President has proposed as it relates to the FY 2018 budget. And so we need to have those resources available to not only start the program in September, but there is another component of the LIHEAP program called the Percentage of Income Payment Plan. And we have over 30,000 households that are on that program right now. If we don't have a budget, those families that are working hard paying their bills on a monthly basis will have to be dropped from that program if we don't have any spending authority. The last thing I will say is, as far as a benefit, the utilities, you're right, the regulated utilities do assess the surcharge on their customers. Those resources go back to assist their low-income customers. If it gets used for other purposes besides that, I would venture to say that that would be unfair for those regulated customers that are providing those resources to help their neighbors afford their utilities.
I might add that there's one other factor here, too, in regards to the inability of the low-income clients to pay their bills. And we have, through Ameren, and also I've had discussions with ComEd, that the bad debt that they've incurred, there's a reason for the bad debt, and it's the inability, not having enough income to pay the total bills. And so we have partnered with them to say that to solve this problem of them not being able to pay their total bills minus the utility bills, it's because there are other services that they sorely need. And so they provide us with the names of those clients, and then we can now contact those clients to understand better what the other needs are. Prior to that, and I don't know when you were involved, we didn't have that type of access or information, and now we're able to address the problem instead of just one part of the problem. And so the elimination of LIHEAP funds would really hamper and destroy the ability to solve the problems that exist within our communities all over the state of Illinois.
Can either of you answer this? So based on the funds available for LIHEAP, federal and state, do we have enough to serve all the people that apply?
No.
No, we don't.
No. We consistently run out of funds. Now, last year, and Delitzo can speak more so to the state, we had a couple of issues. One was that the extreme heat and extreme cold was not as extreme as it's been years past. The other factor is that there was a misunderstanding through the clients throughout the state of Illinois, not just in Cook County and suburban Cook, that there was no more money, so a lot of the clients did not apply for the LIHEAP funds. And the other piece of it was there was an understanding or a misunderstanding that CETA, in and of itself being the largest agency, was closed. So I created about 2 years ago an outreach organization within CETA to literally go out into the communities to inform them that we do have the funds. CETA is still open. And then statewide, there was an aggressive approach to contact the clients that once you utilize the funds from LIHEAP, that the funds are there. So I know we typically, and I think the state typically runs out of funds on an annual basis. And the state portion of the funds from LIHEAP, from the utility companies, are supplemental funds. And they're supplemental for a reason, because we run out of the federal funds quite rapidly.
And just to throw you some numbers to support what Mr. Rice has said, statewide, typically we serve about 38% of the eligible population. And if you're looking at it in terms of income, that is at 150% of poverty and below. In the state of Illinois, that number represents about 1.2 million households. And so 38% is a combination, typically, of the federal as well as the state supplemental fund. If we take out the state funding, we would be probably somewhere around 24% of the eligible households. being served with LIHEAP assistance. So the need is still great, even though we have both sources of funding.
So it's 38% of those that would qualify under the standards or requirements. How many apply that you have to notify that we ran out of funds? What percent of those that apply? And if you don't have that figure now,
We can get it.
I understand the 38%, but I think add insult to injury, folks that have actually applied have gone through the process, and I know it's a lengthy process, if I recall, and then just to be told, sorry, we ran out of funds, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's talk about the process a little bit. And again, this applies not only to Cook County, but to the entire state.
Exactly.
CETA and Cook County being the largest user of LIHEAP funds, obviously. And in terms of the application process, because it takes time. If I recall, you have to work closely with the utility companies, exchange data. They have to come into the office, fill out an application. Which they might have to come back again if something was not filled out properly. Can you start taking applications if funding has not been appropriated?
No.
No, we cannot. We have to wait until the funds are available before we can start that process.
So the longer we wait, as we get closer to the heating season, the worse it is, right? And I think that's one of the issues that we had last year.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if we're taking applications without an appropriation, I mean, that's really making these, vulnerable citizens of our state go through this process without us having any guarantee that we would be able to provide the assistance to them. And per the contracts that we signed with the state of Illinois, we cannot obligate any of the funds unless there's an appropriation in place.
And you prioritize as far as who can apply first, right? You have seniors, if I recall.
Yes.
People with disabilities.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's two periods here. There's a cooling season and there's a heating season. So most people think it only applies to the heating season, but we have people who've actually died because lack of air conditioning in the house or whatever have you. When's the next milestone or the next important date in terms of the application process?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
So there are a couple things with the program overall. The most immediate one is related to this percentage of income payment plan component where the agencies, including mine, will begin to recertify the customers that have been signed up for that program. And that is supposed to begin July 1st. If we don't have a budget July 1st, I'm not sure what the direction from the state is going to be. But a couple years ago, we had about
Just for the record, what's the name of that program?
percentage of income payment plan.
Yeah.
And how many people do we have under that program?
Right now, I think we're over 30,000. 2 years ago, we were around 66,000 households. So not individuals, but households.
Okay. And again, these are folks that actually they contribute something towards their gas or electric, and in return, they get some kind of assistance through the program
Throughout the year, that's correct.
throughout the year.
Yes.
And so for them, July 1st is a critical date.
Very critical, because 2 years ago, we had about 66,000 households that were on that program, and when, there was no appropriation, and this is only funded through the state funding. So when there was no appropriation for state funding, all of those households had to be dropped off that program. And they've worked very hard. They make on-time, regular payments. It's a component of the program, I think, that really helps with self-sufficiency. And if we don't have anything in place by July 1st, that's going to affect about over 33,000 households. Mm-hmm. The second time frame is the beginning of the heating season, which is September 1st, when we prioritize seniors and households with people with disabilities. And then October is when we prioritize households that have children under the ages of 6. But if this is going to be an extremely hot summer, which we don't know what July is going to look like, we have had cooling programs in the past where we've prioritized assistance, and it's a one-time benefit of, I think, $150, and we prioritize that to seniors and households that have individuals with disabilities.
At some point, if either one of you can submit to the committee those timelines, and so these were somewhat cognizant of that as we work on a budget.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem.
And I'm sorry, I've been asking a lot of questions, but we do have Representative Kifowit and Representative Harris for questions. Representative Kifowit.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying today. One of the things you've already touched upon, that you prioritize seniors and the disabled. Can you give me an idea of what percentage of the program is utilized by seniors and what percentage is utilized by individuals with households that have disabled individuals in them? Do you happen to have that information offhand?
So statewide, what is this number? This is seniors, so that's about. So based on our 2015 data, out of about 308,000 households, about half of those were seniors.
Right.
So roughly around 50% were seniors, or households with seniors. Am I reading that right?
And then households with disabled persons in them, do you happen to have that breakdown too?
Yes, I do. And that's about, is that 100,000?
Yeah.
About 100,000 households. And we'll be happy to submit all of this information in writing to the committee.
So 100,000 out of the 108,000, that's about roughly 30%. So we're looking at almost 80% of this program is going to seniors and individuals that are disabled.
Yes.
So one can argue that those are the neediest of the population that we should be focusing on for this program. That's a fair assessment.
It is, and that's why they are addressed first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Harris.
Thank you. We haven't had a budget for 2 years.
Yes.
You were funded this year, correct?
Yes.
And why were you funded this year?
Because the federal pass-through dollars were allowed to go through, as well as the state LIHEAP portion was pulled away from
Right.
the state budget.
And that's my question. Do you get any general revenue funds?
No.
No, you do not. So the General Assembly, in our Constitution, the General Assembly shall by law make appropriations for the expenditure of all public funds, including state funds, federal funds that come in. So what we did was we appropriated for this year those federal funds for you, and then we also appropriated all those other state funds, or most of the other state funds, which includes the monies for LIHEAP.
Yes.
We didn't touch the General Revenue Fund, which is, of course, our big problem.
Right.
So with all respect, and I completely support the program, but in
Yes.
all respect, you may not be the best representatives to highlight the budget issue, because we could appropriate again what we did last year, those federal dollars. We could appropriate those other state funds, which would get you the money, but we still haven't done anything regarding the General Revenue Fund, which is bringing in $32 billion, but we're spending $38 billion.
Right.
But you could get your monies without without an overall budget in place. Is that fair to say? If we
Yes,
if we
that's
took
correct.
the actions that we took for the current fiscal year, you could get your monies.
That's
Yes,
correct.
and I don't want it to go unsaid. I want to thank you. We want to thank you for that action.
Absolutely.
No, we recognize the issue, and again, what you do with the LIHEAP dollars is extremely important. I just want to draw the distinction, though, between the General Revenue Fund
Yes.
and those other state funds and the federal dollars which we did appropriate.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a very good point, and I think just to put things in perspective, you would think that those non-GRF funds, which we call other state funds, which might be funds that come through fees and other things, or even federal dollars, that there should not be an issue, that we should be able to pass those right away.
Yes.
And unfortunately, last year, they were delayed because they got caught up during the budget negotiations, and what we were hoping is that, and to Representative Harris's credit, and I agree that you would think that those funds are earmarked for a specific reason. I think one of the concerns that we have is when these funds are being swept because the money's sitting there.
Right.
And I think it's very important for folks to understand that, again, we don't collect enough to serve the people that need the LIHEAP program or the other programs. And in talking to the Senate, I know they're looking at sweeping those funds too. So I think it's paramount on us to stress that all programs are important. This one obviously impacts lives, and as Harold, as you mentioned, back in 1995, we had several people who died. And I think the Sun-Times just reported back in March that we've had probably anywhere from 9 to 12 deaths in Cook County just because of lack of heat. This is as bad as it gets. I mean, this is not just a building that's not being built because of lack of capital dollars. These are, again, non-GRF, but very important. So we have testimony as well from people who have, actually, we have Gabriela Roman. Could you please come up here? Because you're here to talk about the same thing, right? And then we have some residents that actually are LIHEAP recipients, and with leave of the committee, we do have someone who was listed to come on later, Mrs. Sparks, to talk about the water contaminated with lead. She has to leave a little bit earlier, so I might just interrupt our LIHEAP group and ask her to come up at some point before 1 o'clock or 1:30. And with that, Mrs. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. We might call you back later, but thank you, yeah.
And I have copies of my written testimony as well.
Great. If you can bring the microphone a bit closer and yes, state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairman Crespo and members of the Appropriations-General Services Committee. My name is Gabriela Roman. Oh, okay, it wasn't on. Okay.
Can I give you a written testimony?
Okay, here I am.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
This is all teamwork. We all work together, help each other out. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Honorable Chairman Crespo and members of the Appropriations-General Services Committee. My name is Gabriela Roman, and I am the Executive Director of Spanish Coalition for Housing. We are a 45-year-old nonprofit in Chicago with 3 offices, and we serve over 10,000 clients each year. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about the importance of the LIHEAP program. In 2016, Spanish Coalition for Housing helped 4,607 families to apply for LIHEAP benefits. This is a popular program, yet many have no idea how important the LIHEAP program is to low-income families. You may hear about the LIHEAP program and think it only pays for a month's utility bills, and to many, this may not sound like much. However, the assistance that families receive is much deeper and has a greater impact. The LIHEAP program helps many low-income families in Illinois to maintain their essential utility service, especially during the cold winter months when they need to keep their home warm. If families are behind on their utilities, they may get caught up with their bills and restore their needed services. The value of this program cannot be emphasized enough. The total amount of LIHEAP benefits that a low-income family receives sometimes exceeds what they make in 1 month, making this program a vital component of families' annual household budget. Annual surveys conducted by the National Energy Assistance Directors Association, corroborated by our own experience working with clients, has shown that when families do not have enough money to heat their homes, sometimes they have to take drastic measures. For example, households reported that they took several actions to make ends meet, including closing off part of their home or using the kitchen stove to provide heat. Many of the LIHEAP recipients face significant medical and health problems. Nearly 1/3 reported that they went without food. Over 40% sacrificed medical care. One quarter had someone in their home become sick because their home was too cold. LIHEAP households, as you have heard, include the most vulnerable populations, including seniors, people with disabilities, and children. Some of the families that we have helped include a gentleman who was on SSI disability and received $735 per month. This past November, his gas was disconnected. Without LIHEAP, he would have not been able to get his heat back on. We also helped a single mother of 3 on unemployment behind on her utilities and with disconnected gas services. We assisted her to apply to LIHEAP for both gas and light assistance. She received more than $1,100 towards her utilities. A senior with a fixed income of $880 in Social Security had been trying to secure a one-bedroom apartment at a low-income senior building. Because he had past due bills of over $1,000, he was in jeopardy of losing his apartment. With LIHEAP, he received $1,000, which was applied towards his utility bills, and the services were restored towards his apartment. We also had a single male who sustained an injury at his home and was out of work and without pay. He came to our office to apply for LIHEAP because he was falling behind on his bills. He was granted gas and light assistance totaling $650. We have more than 4,600 stories like these every single year. LIHEAP is a critical component of society's safety net. More than anything, we urge all parties to come together and pass a budget as soon as possible. We do not want any delay in critical funding. The last time the LIHEAP program did not start on time, which was the first year without a state budget, we had mass hysteria at our office on the day that the program finally opened up. As we opened the doors at Spanish Coalition for Housing, we had a mad rush of people. This can only be compared to the crowds and pushing of a Black Friday super sale. But instead of getting deals, people were rushing our office to be one of the first to get their LIHEAP application completed. They were so worried that they might not get to apply or that money might run out. I will never forget this sight. It broke my heart to see seniors and people with disabilities fight for basic human needs. It is a sad sight, and I hope one that is not repeated again. We urge members of the General Assembly and the Governor Rauner to come together and pass a budget that includes LIHEAP. This is not a partisan issue, but an issue of basic human rights and dignity. Our most vulnerable, our seniors, people with disabilities, and our children are counting on our state. We thank the House of Representatives and its leadership for this hearing and shedding a light on this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. As was mentioned earlier, these are non-general revenue funds. What I'm hoping is that we fully fund LIHEAP at what we expected to fund it, and that there's no delays. So at the Spanish Coalition for Housing, do you take in applications? Do you process the applications?
Yes.
Okay, and you work directly with the utility companies?
No, we are subcontracted through CETA.
Okay, so you fill out the applications and they go to CETA.
Yes.
Okay, and you said you serve how many people out of your agency?
Last year was like over 4,600.
Okay,
Many of our clients are bilingual as well. We provide a lot of Spanish services.
okay. Do you do any outreach? Because I think the utility companies do have an insert in their utility bills to announce the LIHEAP. I'm looking at Harold Rice and saying yes. So, okay. So CETA and your agency, you don't do any outreach. You just okay. CETA does do outreach to let people know that this is available. Okay. Questions from the committee? Okay. Mrs. Roman, thank you very much. I'm a Roman too, on my mother's side, by the way.
I am a Roman. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. We do have some folks, LAHEAP recipients. Let me just call these names, and if you can let me know if you're here. Isel Spencer? No. Lydia Eason? No. Drena Richardson? Yvette Figueroa? Mickey Miller? Maria Flores? Hey, we'll be out here in no time. Anita Caballero? Okay, Anita, can you come up here real quick? You're here to testify too? Come up. We have James Shannon and Chanel Greer. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. And then after that, I'm going to interrupt this, and then I'll ask Mrs. Sparks to come up for her testimony. So if I can have Anita Caballero, James Shannon, Chanel Greer, come up. So do we have a volunteer who wants to go first? Anita. And they're all pointing at Anita. Thank you for joining us. If you can please state your name for the record and just bring the microphone a little bit close, that'll be really helpful.
Good afternoon. My name's Anita Caballero, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. I live in the far southwest side, and I am here today because the LAHEAP is very important for me, not just for me, but for the families in my community. I myself live in a low income, and so does my community. And the LAHEAP is very important. It's a low income for a lot of families, and the taxes, the property taxes are being raised all the time. Every year, the property taxes are being raised. So there's a lot of families who cannot afford, who are barely living on the income that they have now. Me, myself, and my husband, we're just barely living on what we're living on now. And with as high as the utilities are now, we're just barely making it with the LAHEAP that we are getting. That's something that is really helping me, not just me, but I know it's helping a lot of other families in the community. Not just that, but also the senior citizens and the people who are on disability, like me. I'm also disabled, so I am also on disability as young age as I am. Well, I don't consider myself very young, but...
You're younger than me. You're young.
Yeah, but also people who are on disability. These families really rely on this program, and this program really helps a lot of families. There's a lot of families out there who really cannot afford what they are living on a year. There's a lot of families out there who are even renting, who cannot even afford what they're living on. And they really rely on this LAHEAP, on this CEDA program. We cannot afford to lose this program. What's going to happen to our families if we lose these programs? What's going to happen to me and my family if I lose this program? What are we going to live on? If our property taxes keep going up, what are we going to live on if we lose this program? What's going to happen to my grandchildren? What are they going to live on? It's bad enough that we can't even get a good job right now. And it's bad enough that the senior citizens, what they're living on right now, and what they're even making on disability right now, and with the property taxes going up, what's going to happen to them if they lose this program? This program is even more important to them. My mother has this program. She's losing her eyesight right now. She lives alone in her home. Her property taxes are even going up. She's just barely making it on her own right now. What's going to happen to my mother if she loses this program? What's going to happen to her? I don't want to send her to a home. I don't want that for her. And I know there's a lot of other families out there who don't want that for their mother either, if they cannot afford to pay what they're living on. This is a very desperate issue for a lot of families out there. They really need this program. They really do. The governor, I hate to say this, but he really needs to do his job. He really needs to do his job. This budget really needs to get settled. As you say that this is hurting everybody, it is. It's really hurting everybody. And this budget needs to get solved. It needs to get solved. Stop hurting everybody. Stop hurting everybody and get the budget solved. Get it solved. That's all you gotta do. Get the budget solved and stop hurting everybody. And let everybody live in a budget that they can afford. And let them have the programs that we need, that the senior citizens need. The heat is coming. The summer's coming and the heat is coming. We cannot afford to lose any lives. We can't. We all want to live our lives as much as we can, and we cannot afford to lose any lives because they're losing their air conditioning in their homes, or because they're losing their light in their homes. And why? Because they cannot afford to pay their bills. So this light heap is very important for our families. It's a desperate need for our communities. So let us keep it. Let us have it. Let the senior citizens have it, and let them live their lives as long as they can live it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caballero. Next, we'll have Chanel Greer.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chanel Greer, and I am a recent college graduate from Chicago State University. So I'm sure you all well aware of everything that's going on with Chicago State. Last year in September 2016, I've sustained a spinal injury from a motor vehicle accident that I was in, and I became disabled. I was currently working for the Illinois Tollway, and because I'm disabled and I wasn't able to perform my job functions, I was eventually terminated. As a result of that, I fell behind in my bills, and I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills. So I was directed to Light Heat, who gave me funding towards my bills, and I was very thankful for that because that helped me stay afloat and kept me from, falling behind. And I just want to say, from the budget impact on us people, it has affected our lives tremendously. And if you guys was to decide to cut out some of these programs like Light Heat, as she was saying before, it would be detrimental on our families. It's already affecting our youth indirectly. I come from the Austin community, and we have a lot of violence that's currently going on. I mean, I see death literally at my doorstep every month. And because of the budget impact, a lot of the schools are being closed down. A lot of the education programs that's being closed down because they don't have funding. We need that. We need that. You have everybody at the top. They living well. They have money because their family not affected by it. But then you have people under the poverty line. We living in chaos. It's like living in hell. I'm a working class citizen. I've been working ever since I was 16. And even though I sustained an injury and I'm disabled now, I continue to press on. I barely graduated from college back in May because we didn't have funding for Chicago State. We was being threatened to close down. But I continued on. I continue on because that was my only hope. I don't have a job now, so I relied on my schooling and just relied on the programs that they do have available for people that's in my situation. So I just really hope that you guys just come together, figure out something, and just not only think about yourself, not only make things about money, have some morality for people. Even if you guys have to cut out your salary just to donate money into the pot to help. What you put out is it comes back to you. We all don't have to, that's our problem as humans. I think we all for self and we are greedy. It's enough to go around for everybody. I really believe that. And I just really appreciate you guys taking the time out to just hear our testimonies. And I'm just gonna keep going and keep pushing. And if I ever get in a position, I promise I'm gonna help people. I'm gonna work hard to help people. And that's all I want to say. Pass it on to James Shannon.
Thank you, Chanel. Next we have James Shannon.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairman and the committee. I'm going to back up a little bit. In 2011, I was laid off.
Can you state your name for the record?
My name is James R. Shannon. In 2011, I was laid off working for the Cook County Circuit Clerk's Office as a files manager. During that era, my unemployment had run out. I had to struggle. I was a single parent, to try to find ways to survive. Not only that, I'm a United States Marine Corps Vietnam veteran. I couldn't understand why I was laid off, and I had an impeccable record with the clerk's office. I eventually scuffled and struggled, and at my age, I'll be 65 this year, it was hard to find a job. Fortunately, I ran into an organization through the Veterans Administration that assisted me with my rent. CWT program. And then after that, I ran into another organization, which I'm working under at presently. It's through National Able Network, where they hire seniors, not really hire, but train them through non-for-profit agencies, hopefully that they would gain employment. I'm working right now with an organization through that program, Vision of Restoration in Maywood, and I work as a case manager. In fact, Chanel Greer was one of my clients. I receive people in through the LIHEAP program overwhelmingly, and there are people that we could not assist. Just yesterday, there was a young lady that came in and her services were cut off. 4 of her children have asthma, and she have a nebulizer. And those children can't receive their treatment. And we had to fight and struggle. And today, because I was supposed to receive, word of whether or not they're going to, turn her services back on, I don't know yet. I'm going to go back and find out. But there are many, many, many people that are suffering. And people are being forced into homelessness. The organization I work for is about to close its door. There was about 6 of us when I first started there. I'm the only one case manager there. I do case management. They can't hire me because they are afraid that pretty soon they're going to close their door. And this is on, and it's just a big, massive mess. And that, like Ms. Greer was saying, I'm from the Austin community. I do prayer vigils. Someone got killed right in front of her property, right on the corner, every other day. And these people are being forced into a lifestyle that they don't have any other hope to try to seek another answer. Now we see today, even our congressman was shot, one of the congressmen, and it says reverting to violence. And I don't want to say that's what's happening, but it is. It's really happening all over. These programs are very necessary. I have seen buckets of tears come in my office, buckets of tears. And seniors, as you said, they receive 50% of the programs for this program, and they're first every year, just in the event that they run out of funds, But it's just really a tremendous help. And you know, it's just very gratifying. People thank me, but you know, I'm just the intake person, you know. And it's just something that's really needed, and hopefully the budget will be passed. They say we're at an impasse, but I think it's just shameful. Even though I don't want to rehash the reasons why we're spending more expenditures, but it's just shameful. And I just want to say we just need to continue doing all we can to continue these programs. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Did you just mention that you had a family that came to the intake center and you're waiting for their services to be restored?
Yes.
And they had a medical condition at home?
4 of her children have asthma, and they have nebulizers. They have a nebulizer so they could breathe.
And is this for electric company?
Electric, ComEd.
Because I thought that if you had someone who had a medical condition, you can get like a 30-day extension.
Correct, to establish a payment plan. But they're giving her a hard time, you know, to really get her recognized as such. So
Okay.
she did receive her medical certificate yesterday, and I faxed it in.
Okay, so you did get that.
I faxed it in, so I don't know if her service was reconnected yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Ms. Greer, so LIHEAP, do you use LIHEAP for both cooling and heating, or for heating only?
Electric and gas.
Electric and gas? And Ms. Cavallaro, both electric and gas? Okay, so you need it for the entire year, pretty much?
Yes.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Well, I want to thank you for taking time and sharing your experiences with us. So it's good for us to see that there are real people who are being impacted by this. And I'm very familiar with the LIHEAP program. I know it helps a lot of folks. Again, this is a non-GRF funding, so we would hope that it doesn't get stuck with all this budget negotiations, and hopefully by the end of June we were able to pass at least a budget that takes care of other state funds, and also make sure they're funded at what they're supposed to be funded at. And but I want to thank you for your time and for joining us. I know sometimes it's not very
Thank
easy.
you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to ask Pat Devaney and Mike, if you can just give me 1 second. I have someone who has to leave soon, and we have Ms. Deidre Sparks. Thank you, Ms. Sparks. I know you have to be out here at 1:30, so I figured to have you come up and give us your testimony, if you may. If you can state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Deirdre Sparks, and I'm here on behalf of the environmental issue regarding the lead in the water. My daughter attends a Chicago public school where lead was found in the water last year, and the parents were sent a memo stating that the water had lead in it. And so backing up to when they found the lead in the water, and I'm going to rewind and fast forward, we're under the impression that the testing, the future testing for the water is appropriated by the budget from GSA. Like, you all fund the companies or individuals that come out and test the water. Is that correct?
We're going to have to get back to you. I know that the EPA has, I believe, 4 funds, and I know I've been talking to staff trying to figure out which of those funds would apply to the issue at hand, and we'll find out.
Okay. So my concern is, as a parent, the testing came in as like a we're going to be proactive so we don't have a Flint situation, so that we don't have pandemonium and mega protesting coming from CPS students, basically overall Chicago citizens. Like what happened in Flint, the situation was kind of brushed under the rug. Their voices weren't heard, and the media kind of like somewhat covered it, primarily because they were, it was mainly not low income, but they were mainly African American citizens. But this particular lead testing and the lead that was found in the waters here, they were found in municipalities, Chicago Park District buildings, and CPS school buildings. So this one, if we had the same situation that we had in Flint, the results wouldn't be the same because our voices, the protests would be louder, they would be heard more, and you wouldn't be able to just brush and sweep this one under the rug. So they became proactive, but what we want to know is how can you all fix the situation so where the budget does not affect future testings of the water? So we're trying to, I want an answer so I can go back and give the parents and individuals that I know are waiting on these answers so I can give them your response. So then once I give them your response, then they will know the next step that they need to take.
And I appreciate the testimony. And again, I know the Attorney General, who they also come before this committee for their funding, has an initiative specifically on that issue, on water lead issues in Chicago at the schools. I believe the bill passed. I'm not sure how that takes care of your issue. In terms of the EPA, I am aware that there's 4 funds and how it relates or how they can help, whether testing. We need to get back to you on that one.
Okay. So when I go back and they say they need to get back with me on that one, then what exactly does that mean?
In terms of?
You went to testify about how we feel about the lead that was found in our schools that our children drink,
Yeah.
the water that the children are drinking, the water that could possibly hurt, injure, or even kill them. And I'm asking for...
Well, my response would be this. Number one, I also share the Education Committee in the House for Curriculum and Policy, and this is an issue that's come up, especially in Chicago. How the city of Chicago is dealing with it, I cannot speak to that. How the Chicago public school system is treating that, I cannot speak to that. In terms of the state, I know if the budget is in fact impacting the ability of the EPA to put out funds to deal with issues like that, I'm going to have to find out. I cannot speak to that. EPA, unless I have someone from the EPA here who can address that, and I don't think I do.
So again, when I go back to these individuals, what type of response would I give them as far as like, oh, well, they're going to get back with me as far as like, are you going to call me, email me,
Well,
or will there
I
something
believe
be
Representative
available in
Harper,
writing where we can see it? Because like when they did the testing, they sent they sent the memo out. That's mediocre memo, I'll say. Oh, by the way, there's lead in the water, but don't worry about it because the testing came out like in June when school was about to close. So the parents, we were concerned, but it's like, okay, school will be out. School started back. We got no memo, no notice, no nothing saying that the water was fine. We had to verbally ask them, was the water fine? Oh yeah, the water's fine. The children have to drink this water. It's not just how they would probably think that it's low income. My child goes to a regional gifted magnet school, and a lot of those schools were affected by that water. The Chicago Park districts were affected by that lead-contaminated water. We're under the impression that a portion of this budget goes to the individuals that come out and actually test the water. So when it came back time to start school in September, we're clueless on, is the water okay? Have they did more testings? We don't know. So now we're told that since we don't have a budget, the water may not be tested appropriately in a timely manner. Then I'm going to rewind back to the whole budget situation as, what's his name right here? Representative
Harris.
Harris. Representative Harris mentioned that it's a math problem with the state budget. I used to work for the state, like, I want to say in the 90s. And I worked in a very I worked in administration with people who actually controlled the budget of DHS, and I don't have anything personal against Governor Rauner, but the thing when Representative Harris mentions that there's a math problem and that the spending, he said there's more revenue going out than coming in. Well, the state employees were spending that money. I know for a fact. I used to watch them. I used to write off on one of those budgets. So what the public would like to know, can we see the budgets? Can we see the budgets that Rauner and Madigan keep headbutting on so we can, I know how to read a budget. Some of the general public does not know how, but we have people that can interpret the budgets for them, because I would like to see this budget that they're saying, oh, there's more money going out than there is coming in, but I would like to see the budgets going back to the 90s when I was working for the state up until now. Budgets are supposed to be made public. I would like to see the budgets to see, like, is Rauner on track? Because if he is, that's fine.
Okay.
But if he's not, then we have a right to know. It's like he said, more money is going out. Where is it going out to? Then more money is coming in. Like I said, I knew where some of the money was going out. They used to party a lot, for one thing, and they wasted a lot of money on things that they had no business wasting the money on. So the whole budget issue, as far as like we're so far behind in debt, had to do with a lot of the state employees spending that money. State employees from the top, some lower level, but mainly from the top. And so we have a right to see that budget and know where that money was going to, who was signing off on the checks, and who was benefiting from the budget.
Okay. So the budgets, you can find those on the Illinois website. So anytime we file a budget, everything's there. We do have Representative Harris for a question. I believe Representative Harper.
Thank you. And are you going to ask questions? Well, I think my colleague to my left, Representative Harper, if I'm not mistaken, was the sponsor of the lead testing bill last year. And I know this is a new program, so that there is some confusion. Not confusion is the wrong word. All of the details are being worked out. As I understand, and again, I don't know all of the details, but as I understand it, it is this, if the school was built before 1987, they have to be tested by December 31st of this year, correct?
Yes.
And does the school collect the water and send the sample somewhere? Do you know?
No. From our understanding, they have either private contractors or people from GSA that comes in and tests the water.
Okay,
So we were trying to figure out, like, well, where's the money coming from? The money is coming from the state. Oh, the money's coming from the state. So that means that the money that is budgeted in is going to be tied up. And so that's what we have the problem with.
Right. Well, I think there are 3 agencies involved here. I think there are the Department of Public Health. I think there's the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. And I think for daycare providers, there's the Department of Children and Family Services. I think that's involved in the testing. I can't tell you exactly how the dollars flow. You are correct that for those agencies that would receive general revenue dollars, such as Public Health and DCFS, there would be an issue about how they get the money, since there is no budget. IEPA does not get any general revenue funds, so there again you have other funds that they rely on. I think you brought up some good questions. We can check on that. We have a program in place that we need to fund appropriately, and lead in the water is an issue we need to address. And as I said, Representative Harper passed a significant bill last year. So I'm glad you brought this to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Harper.
I'd just like to thank Ms. Sparks for coming and offering her testimony today. And one of the main reasons why I helped to get Senate Bill 550 passed last year was because of those test results. They came out at Beasley, which is also important to me because that's where my daughter attends as well. And I just wanted to let you know we are going to work on getting the answers to those questions, just so you know that. Thank you.
Because they're waiting, and what's going to happen is when I go back as my regular Joe self, they're going to ask me, so what did you hear? What happened? And then I have to reiterate what Representative said, I'll get back with you. And it's a human factor. I understand your jobs, and I know how to be nonchalant and unemotional as well, but these are people I see every day, and they see people, they see people, they see people, and the numbers get larger. And so if a rumor gets, or I go and tell them that they said they will get back with me, you know how our city is. We don't want Flint. We don't want the results of Flint here. And if some babies have to get tested, lead tested, when they go to get their annual checkup, if the lead pops up in their system and their elementary students, they're going to want to know, first, did it come from the household? Household gets tested. Where did it come from? If it's CPS, we're going to have a serious problem. You know how they protest here. You know how they voice here. The media can't stop the outpour of the voices. It's like you can say, well, don't air this. They'll go to social media, and there's no stopping. And then it's like, who looks bad? We look bad because the babies got affected. So having you say, Representative Harris, that you'll have something to give to Representative Harper, something that she can give me to go back with, that's more sound than versus I'll get back with you on that, because that is going to have me thrown under the bus, so to say. So thank you for that, and thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, next we have Pat Devaney and Michael Henkelman from the Oak Park Fire Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Pat Devaney. I'm the president of the Associated Firefighters of Illinois. The AFFI represents 15,000 members and 222 locals across the state, all of which are local government employees. So our affiliates and our members rely on state appropriations, notwithstanding things you do for the community in general, like LGDF and revenue sharing that helps pay for public safety. There are very few things that are funded at the state level for our members. However, one of them is the Illinois Line of Duty Death Compensation Act. It is a very important benefit to us because the only way one qualifies for it is if they are killed in the line of duty while protecting their communities. It provides a very modest benefit for the families, a one-time benefit that includes burial expenses. I'm sure you can understand and anticipate how frustrated and angry our membership is that we have members who we lost, and we went through that emotional toll at the local level and with the family, and continue to support them. However, they are not being compensated by the state as they are due. Rather than to speak about it further in general, I've invited, and I appreciate your willingness to allow him to testify, firefighter Michael Henkelman from the Oak Park Fire Department. He's going to offer a personal and professional perspective of what happens when you suffer a line of duty death and the impact the lack of the state budget is having on his department and those families. Michael?
Thanks, Pat. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to provide some brief testimony regarding the Illinois Line of Duty Death Compensation Act. I'd like to specifically focus on the state's failure to fund the benefit and the impact that it's having on the families of the firefighters who were killed in the line of duty while protecting communities across our state. As most of you know, the Illinois Line of Duty Death Compensation Act provides a one-time payment of $351,383 to the surviving spouse of a firefighter or police officer who was killed in the line of duty. It also provides a modest reimbursement for burial expenses of up to $10,000. I know firsthand the hardships endured by a family when their husband or father is killed as a result of duty as a firefighter. On January 11, 2016, the Oak Park Fire Department lost my friend and brother firefighter Ken Harris. He died as a result of a cardiac arrest shortly after returning from the final emergency call of his shift. Ken was a 28-year veteran of the department. He was an extremely knowledgeable and hardworking firefighter-paramedic who cared deeply about our department and the people in the community he served. Ken loved doing his job, and over the course of almost 3 decades, Ken responded to thousands of emergency incidents and was personally involved in saving the lives of innumerable residents in Oak Park and the surrounding communities. My friend Ken Harris was a great firefighter. He was always willing to give advice and take time to show less experienced members the proper way the job needed to be done. Ken was caring, empathetic, and very good at his job. The Oak Park Fire Department lost a great man, but that loss pales in comparison when you consider the devastation that the Harris family suffered. Ken's wife, Shirley, took all of the necessary steps to apply for the benefit in the Illinois Line of Duty Compensation Act and was approved for the benefit by the Illinois Court of Claims on March 3rd, 2016. Unfortunately, Shirley and her family have not received a single penny from the state due to Illinois' failure to pass a budget. She is not alone. There are currently 7 surviving wives of police officers and firefighters who were approved for the benefit after their loved one made the ultimate sacrifice while performing their duties. The state owes these women and dependent children about $2.7 million. I know this seems like a paltry sum in contrast to the overall state budget, but to the surviving widows like Shirley, the $350,000 benefit would help to improve their financial stability after experiencing such a devastating loss. On a personal note, it has been extremely frustrating for my coworkers and me to sit by and observe the willful disregard for the Harris family after they experienced such a devastating loss. It was very disheartening to read the statements in an April 3rd article from the governor's spokesperson that the benefit should be funded only as a part of an overall budget deal. They deserve better than to be held hostage in a political battle where it doesn't appear that the needs of the most vulnerable and deserving in our state are of any importance. We do recognize that some of you have been working diligently to secure funding for Shirley Harris and the other beneficiaries, and we thank you for your efforts. We encourage the governor to commit his signature to a standalone appropriation bill to fund the Illinois Line of Duty Death Compensation Act, or propose a balanced budget that includes adequate funding for this modest benefit. Anything less is a disservice to our brother Ken Harris and the other police officers and firefighters who have given so much in fulfilling their duty to protect the citizens of Illinois. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today and offer testimony on this extremely important issue.
Thank you. Mr. Devaney, so do you know how many families are actually out there that have been awarded funds?
So I know as of April, when we last spoke about this issue, there were 7 families of police officers and firefighters that had been approved for the benefit. However, it's also my understanding that there have been additional applicants that will likely be approved, including, ironically, Lawrence Matthews. Some of you may have read about it this week. The Dalton firefighter, 36 years old, who suffered a cardiac arrest while operating at a fire in Harvey. I'll be going to his wake on Friday and his funeral on Saturday morning as a line of duty death.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? So, in that article you referenced, was written, and I think I was quoted in that article. They were talking about the line of duty, and you mentioned one of the or the response from the administration that the spokesperson said that the administration, the governor believes that the state should uphold any promised payments made to the families of fallen responders, but emphasize that the payments should be part of a broader budget deal. You know, I'll tell you, putting a budget together is really fairly easy. As I mentioned before, it's just your plus and minuses that needs to balance. There's just this one component, which is the social responsibility that we can't ignore, and this is one of them. And I've said this publicly many times that number one, I think in order to, the total amount of the awards for the 7 families is just a little bit north of $2 million. Sounds like a lot of money. And also, make sure we understand, this is GRF. It comes from the General Revenue Fund. But what really irks me in this committee, we've had agencies come up here and defend some of their programs where money is, for some reason or another, being put out there. One are the state fairs in the state of Illinois. I'm trying to reconcile, how is it possible we cannot get $2 million of GRF for these 7 families, and we're still holding state fairs in the state of Illinois? We had testimony from the Department of Innovation and Technology. Very important work. I'm not saying it's not. Where we've had the former comptroller transfer $71 million out of GRF to make sure that the operations of the Department of Innovation and Technology can continue. But for some reason, we cannot come around to us releasing $2 million for these 7 families. And you know, this is, as I mentioned before, it's not just like a building that, hey, if we don't have the capital dollars, that building's gonna have to wait. These are young kids or families that every day does matter, makes a huge difference. So again, you know, I'm hoping that we somehow come up with an overall budget by the end of June. In the meantime, I think we need to take a step back and think about these 7 families and other folks that somehow really can't wait much longer. Representative Harris.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, and to address this directly, and along the same lines as to how we prioritize, these are general revenue funds. So the entire general revenue fund budget has been held up now for 2 years. And it is more than unfortunate that these 7 families have not gotten their just claim. I mean, they are entitled to it, they should get it, and I don't think there's any disagreement about that. It's not just those 7 families that are, as you say, being held hostage, if you want to use that term. It's not just those 7 families, it's those social service providers, those people rely on, those individuals that rely on social service dollars. It's the medical providers. They're all, in essence, held hostage. I always like to put into the record, because it's sort of a pet peeve of mine, that the Constitution of the state of Illinois says, and I repeated this earlier, that the General Assembly by law shall make appropriations for the expenditure of all public funds. The General Assembly shall make appropriations for the expenditure of all public funds. Unfortunately, in my mind, the courts have stepped in and they have said, you, state of Illinois / comptroller, will pay the following liabilities, and those might be Medicaid liabilities, those might be employee salaries, and we didn't make any appropriations for that. So now these dollars are going out, and because they're going out and we don't have an appropriation, your 7 families don't receive the dollars that they should be getting. And that judge, whether it's a state judge or a federal judge, who in my mind is acting unconstitutionally because we have not made an appropriation, that judge should have said, we have 7 families here who their wage earner died in the line of duty and they are entitled to $350-some thousand each. Unfortunately, those judges didn't do that. This is one of those. This is one of those issues where there's a long line of people that are waiting for those dollars. All of them, in my mind, for the most part, are justified in getting what is owed to them, and it's this frustrating, maddening budget impasse that is both hurting them as well as hurting the state. But I appreciate you bringing forward and highlighting these individuals, which quite frankly sometimes we lose sight of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you for your time. Mike, you have a tough job, so we'll do the best that we can. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to be before you.
Okay, next we have Chris, is it Holly? Holy. Holy, okay, yeah, it's Holy. Please come up and state your name for the record.
Okay.
In the meantime, I should add that we do have a letter that was written testimony from the Illinois Court of Claims, which was passed out to all the members. Mr. Holey?
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you for your time today. I'm here, first I'll start out with my name, Christopher Holey. I'm a 21-year state employee, currently working for the Illinois EPA. I'm also a veteran of the United States Army, 12 Special Forces, and a member of the American Legion in Lockport, Illinois. I have a wife, Lynn, and a son, Nicholas. My wife, Lynn, is a 2-time leukemia survivor and a breast cancer survivor. The reason I'm here to testify today is that I and many of my coworkers have dental bills that have not been paid by the state for over 2 years. Some of mine date back to December 2015 to the present. And I have copies of bills if people wish to see them. Because my dental bills are not being paid in a timely manner, I am being forced to go into my savings and use credit cards to pay the bill. I am extremely worried that I may not be able to continue to make the payments. My wife, currently a leukemia and breast cancer survivor, goes to Lamont Family Dental. It's an out-of-network dental provider because the chemotherapy and irradiation treatments that she received had a major effect on her teeth. Jennifer, our dentist, goes the extra mile when it comes to providing services. She even calls us after she administers treatment to my wife to see how she's doing the next day. Unfortunately, Lamont Family Dental had to change their payment policy a number of years ago from waiting for the state of Illinois to pay to having to have the patient pay the entire amount and then wait for reimbursement for some months and years later. I do note that the state does pay a 9% interest rate, but I believe it is too little too late. Does it not make sense to pay up front to allow people to have the preventative dental care that they need rather than waiting for much larger issues to occur at a greater cost? I am asked to do this despite not having a pay increase for over 3 years. With another year of no state budget, I can only expect that no timely reimbursement from the state of Illinois will continue. To add insult to injury, our governor is in court as I speak trying to oppose a 120% increase in our health care costs. Over the past 21 years, I've made the commitment to pay for my dental services from my paycheck each month. Unfortunately, it appears that the state of Illinois has taken another holiday on paying services to the providers, on paying service providers to the state of Illinois. In closing, as a citizen, a taxpayer, an employee of the state of Illinois, I ask that the political division in Springfield end. I ask that the needs of the people be put ahead of politics. And I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Holey. Representative Harris for a question.
Okay, off script here.
Yes, sir.
You were part of the 12th Special Forces Group?
Yes, sir.
What company?
12th Signal Company in Arlington Heights.
In Arlington Heights. So you were with the reserves?
Correct.
Or you were not on an A team?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, all right. I was going to be even more impressed if you had said yes.
Hey, you get my dental bills paid, I'll be really happy.
Okay. I just want to let you know, and that was a sidebar, but just to let you know, all of us who go to our healthcare providers, we sit in the same boat as you do. That's not to say that we're any better or just any less sympathetic. I go to my dentist, and I know he hasn't been paid for the last maybe year or 18 months, and it's just an embarrassment. And your medical bills certainly are something which is, again, like the folks who testified earlier, you're being held hostage to this impasse. We need to get it resolved. Hopefully, we can get it resolved quickly and get those bills paid. But thank you for your testimony.
I'd like to add one thing, if I could. Our members are paying out of their paycheck each week, and we're wondering where that money's going. From everything I've heard, I even have a phone number here that people can call, and they tell you that they're not going to, due to the budget impasse, they're not going to pay from from September 2015 to the present. I kind of feel like they're holding us hostage, but we are giving money for a service, and
Well,
I would
and
think that if
just very-
typically if you're not being reimbursed or
Well, just very briefly, so are we. I mean, we get deductions from our paychecks, and if I go to my dentist, the dentist sends the bill to the state. It's recorded as, yes, this is a valid bill, and that bill then goes to the comptroller's office. Unfortunately, we're bringing in $32 billion, but we're spending at the rate of $38 billion in round figures, so that bill that goes to the comptroller's office just gets put in a long queue.
Mm-hmm.
And those medical bills are the longest queue in the comptroller's office. And as some money comes in, the comptroller can pay some of these bills that are up at the front of the queue. But these other bills are way back at the end of the queue, and it takes a long time for those bills to come up to the front of the queue. And I mean, your health insurance premiums, my health insurance premiums are being used to pay the bills. The problem is there's supposed to be general revenue funds put into there also to help pay these bills, and that's not happening, so that queue is getting longer and longer and longer. So just by way of explanation.
Okay, thank you for your time with that.
Representative Kifowit.
Thank you for being here. I was in the Marines, so I'm not as impressed with your Army stuff. Just kidding. I want to thank you for offering testimony on a very, very important subject. To be quite honest, it's not fair to say that bills aren't getting paid from September 2015. The fact of the matter is the state of Illinois has been shorting group health insurance for years. In fact, one of the first votes I took when I first came into office was to shore up a $600 million group health insurance shortfall from the budget that was passed before I was sworn in. I've had bills that should have been paid under the last fiscal year 15 budget that was passed. That was not, because simply it was underfunded and ran out of money. So, and this is going back early in 2015 for some emergency room bills. So the fact of the matter that the process of continually shorting group health insurance is a big problem of what we see again today with the budget impasse. And unfortunately, in the proposed budget by the governor, it again proposes to short group health insurance over $400 million. So it's tragic, and it's irresponsible to continue to use such a vital service such as group health insurance as a budgeting gimmick in trying to put together the actual budget for this year, and I have been consistently not in favor of that plan. And I think, for the record, we have to put that fact out there that the state of Illinois has been continually shorting group health insurance on their budgets, which exasperates this problem. And while I realize that the General Assembly has the authority to appropriate and should appropriate, we also have to recognize that the appropriation needs to be signed by the governor. And unfortunately, the stopgap bills that the governor has signed did not appropriate group health insurance or the line of duty or some of these other items that or properly fund domestic violence shelters that needed to have proper funding. So while the onus does go on the General Assembly, and the General Assembly did not override the governor's veto in 2015, which then triggered the court spending in excess of $39 billion. The fact of the matter is the governor needs to be a partner in this process, and his proposed budget shorted group health insurance as well. So we all need to come together and truly pay back the back debt in addition to properly funding every year group health insurance. So I certainly appreciate your testimony and hope and pray for a solution by
Me
the end
too.
of the
Thank
month.
you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, since we're all talking about our own dental bills, not all of us stand in the same position. I refused any health insurance benefits, so I do not have dental insurance, neither myself privately nor through the state, because I was not going to add to the burden of the state's expenses for myself. So I pay mine out of pocket. But I certainly sympathize with your situation, and I agree with you, it should be paid. What I disagree with is this subliminal, if not more direct blame against the governor. The governor does indeed have to sign the budget, but we have to do that job first, and we have not done that job. And stopgap budgets are not going to get us to that job. In fact, those make it worse, not better. And so, to be honest, about 11 o'clock today, the House Republicans introduced a budget. And it largely picks up on where the Senate Democrats left off, including a revenue increase. So I think we are trying to do that. I have not seen the House Democrats' budget. That has not dropped yet. So I would just encourage that the blame game not continue, and that we do work in earnest together to try to get this done. I would also note that the shortage in the group health care was also part of the Senate Democrats' bill, the 435. So that's not just the governor's proposal. So I just want to keep this in mind, that the blame game is not getting us anywhere, and it should stop. What we should be doing is working together to fully fund all of our agencies, all of our obligations, and stopgaps aren't going to do that. They're going to make it worse. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It sounds like you've been talking to Rich Miller from Capital Facts.
Thank you for the comments. Representative Anderson, I heard that there was Leader Durkin had some kind of press conference today. I haven't seen anything. I can tell you on the House's side that we have been looking at the Senate version of their appropriation bill. My understanding in speaking to the appropriate chairs in the Senate is that 80% was contained in that bill was agreed upon with the administration, including the assumptions they agreed on. That there's two assumptions that I can tell you personally I do not agree with, and I think some of my colleagues feel the same way, and that is that there's an assumption that there's going to be savings of approximately $450 million in group health, and that there's going to be savings of close to $1 billion in pension reform, which is something that the administration asked for, and the Senate obliged, and they included that in their Senate version. So we're looking at the Senate version. Hopefully something will pop up before the end of June, and if there's agreement in the Senate on that bill, although they did not support it, hopefully that would be the basis for a budget and how it compares with what Leader Durkin presented today. At this point, I have no clue, but I can give you my word that I'll take a close look, and hopefully we can reconcile that version with what we're looking at from the Senate's point as well, which includes, by the way, a combination of cuts and revenue enhancements. But, and this is not blaming anyone, this is just a factual statement. And the governor has said many times that he agrees that a budget should include cuts and revenue enhancements. Granted, he's also asking for some reforms. But I just recently saw something, some social media ad where our governor said that encouraging people to tell us not to vote for a tax increase. So hopefully, again, we can come up with a good budget that's based on sound public policy, and hopefully, I agree with you, we stop pointing fingers, and as rank and file, I think my experience has been that we get it. Unfortunately, when it leaves our hands, it's beyond us, and then things sometimes fall apart. But I appreciate the remarks.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chair, and I have said for a long time that both sides need to work together. We shouldn't wait any longer on the Senate. They've done their job for the most part. They've sent their bills over to us. It's our job to work together. I know that my leader reached out to the Speaker now several weeks ago, and he didn't do it with any fanfare, by the way. He did it quietly, picked up the phone and asked to meet. And the response was silence. And to this date, I believe it's silence. So I do hope that, and I take your words and I believe you entirely, I hope that that good faith goes both ways and that we do come together and we work on solving this problem. Because yourself and General Harris both said it correctly. This is a math problem, and we can solve it together. You didn't say that, David? He said it. That gentleman over there said it, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, then I agree with that gentleman, that it is a math problem, and that we can get this done together. But I would just, again, reiterate that blame games do not bring us together. They separate us. So let's stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holy, so just again for the record, you, just like most state employees, you continue paying your monthly health insurance?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay. And I talked about some of the assumptions built into the Senate's appropriation version, which claims that they might save $400+ million in group health insurance, which some of us believe it's hard to do. I should also add that while we were in Springfield, we had another state employee, Kanea Williams, who testified before this committee. And her baby has to use an oxygen tank mask. And because the provider of the oxygen, the supplier of the oxygen tank wasn't getting paid, I guess they got a writ. They sent some sheriffs over to her house to remove the oxygen tank. She testified before the committee. The baby was there. Thank God that the sheriffs saw the condition of the baby, and they're like, we can't do that, and things were corrected. So, again, these are real life stories. So we understand that not having a budget in place impacts a lot of folks. Some people are impacted more than others, and this is becoming a life and death issue sometimes. So I appreciate your testimony. Good luck with your family and your wife, and hopefully things will come. We'll come with a budget soon, so we can take care of some of those problems.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your service. Next, we have Leslie Corbett from the Illinois Equal Justice Foundation. Leslie, thank you for your patience.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Corbett, and I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Equal Justice Foundation. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today about the importance of state funding for civil legal aid and the urgent need to pass a state budget. You might be wondering what civil legal aid is doing in front of this committee, so I thought I'd unshroud that mystery. Our appropriation goes through the Attorney General's budget, and she's a huge supporter of our work. So what is civil legal aid, and why should that rise to the top in all of the other important topics that we've talked about today? Well, unlike in criminal legal matters, the Constitution does not guarantee a right to legal assistance in civil cases, and tens of thousands of Illinoisans cannot afford the help they need when facing potentially life-changing situations. They have to navigate these complex legal situations by themselves, and the stakes are high. They can lose their families, their homes, and their livelihoods. Civil legal aid helps ensure that fairness for all in the justice system, regardless of how much money they have. And the justice system is an incredibly powerful tool for solving problems. Legal aid organizations handle problems and deal with folks like families losing their homes and ending up on the streets, women and children trapped in violent situations, elderly homeowners being scammed by predatory contractors, and parents losing critical care for very ill children simply because of a bureaucratic snafu. Via a state appropriation, the Illinois Equal Justice Foundation funds nonprofit civil legal aid providers across the state, ensuring that all residents, regardless of income, have equal access to the justice system. Since 2001, the foundation has awarded $23.3 million in state-funded grants to legal aid providers across the state, serving the critical legal needs of over 560,000 low-income seniors, families, and veterans. Some of the organizations that have been on our grant list I'm sure will be familiar with you because they're in your districts: Prairie State Legal Services, Land of Lincoln Legal Assistance Foundation, Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. We're proud of the work of all of these organizations. The problem is in that the civil legal aid appropriation was not included in the stopgap budget. And so that means 2 years of no state funding for these organizations that are already underfunded, as I'm sure you know. And that means these critical services that help keep your constituents housed, safe, and economically independent are in jeopardy. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the legal aid system is starting to unravel a bit. Legal aid organizations are reducing staff, and obviously they're serving fewer people who are in critical need. A couple of examples: Prairie State Legal Services, which is one of the only legal aid providers in 36 counties in northern and western Illinois, have recently laid off 14 attorneys and paralegals due to the funding uncertainty. Someone mentioned the fact that domestic violence organizations were hit by the budget impasse. It was a double whammy for those organizations that actually provide legal services because we weren't able to provide them with funding last year from this source. The delay of the Area Agency on Aging funding actually negatively impacted legal aid providers as well, who are often the legal representatives contracted out for those services. That means seniors who need wills, guardianships, housing are being preyed upon by consumer fraud con artists. Not as many of those got served, for sure. To add insult to injury, federal funding for civil legal aid was not included in President Trump's budget. So a double whammy of a lack of state and federal funding will be disastrous for Illinois, particularly downstate where there are 2 major programs that serve 101 counties. These are programs that don't have the same sort of resources that Chicago-based programs might, and it would be really disastrous for the majority of the state. Now, I know that sounded all doom and gloom. We did have a bright spot today, and my guest is going to tell you a little bit more about that. In 2015, the legislature amended the Access to Justice Act, which called for a $2 surcharge on civil filing fees to be accumulated and directed towards developing a legal aid hotline and supporting legal aid services for military and active and veterans. And that was in the stopgap budget. So that's the bright spot of our year. Those grants were made last month, and one of the organizations that received one of those grants is John Marshall Law School's Veterans Legal Clinic. And with me today is Chester Henry, who has benefited from the services of that legal clinic, and he'd like to share his story with you today.
Thank you. You can state your name for the record, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chester Henry, former Marine, and I've used the John Marshall Law School to gather information and get my discharge upgraded. Gave me to benefit from my health benefits. They put together my case starting back in 2001. And for 16 years now, we've been fighting this. Finally, I've got my discharge upgraded, my health benefits, and they've been done very good in researching the cases. And I've got veterans out there I'm steady trying to reach now to get them to step forward and utilize these services.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Without state funding for these services, our servicemen and women are not going to have anywhere to go with these sort of issues. These funds for the project we're talking about right now are not general revenue funds. They are a filing fee. However, without a budget or some sort of appropriation power, we're not going to be able to access those funds in the upcoming fiscal year. As I mentioned previously, both of these funding sources go through the Attorney General Madigan's budget, but I also wanted to note that they were both included in Senate Bill 6 as well. In conclusion, the measure of society is how we treat our most vulnerable, and right now, Illinois is not measuring up. We are here to teach you about legal aid and the importance of it, but also just to implore the governor and the state legislature to come together and get this done. We have countless horror stories, and there have been many today, and it's just a horribly sad situation. And particularly in our legal realm here, all we're looking for is justice, and we're hoping that you can help with that situation. Thank you all for your time, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Red. Just for the record, so in terms of overall funding, how much is normally funded from the federal government? Do you know?
Oh, for the state of Illinois? That's a good question. I want to say it's approximately 12 million, but I would like to confirm that and get back to you on that.
And in terms of state non-GRF, do you know what?
Non-GRF in terms of other contracts like domestic violence and so forth, those are usually not necessarily, I don't have that figure. I will need to get that for you.
Okay. I believe Representative Harris had a question? Oh, I thought you looked back. Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but I want to point out one other bright spot in this particular realm, being an attorney myself, is that, and I'm not in any way minimizing your point. I totally agree with your point. The lack of a budget is devastating on these services and so many more. But I do have to give a shout out to the attorneys around the state who provide countless hours of pro bono legal services, oftentimes through these programs, coordinated through these programs. In my area in King County, Prairie State does that. And they do a wonderful job of stepping up. They receive no compensation for it. They're often the most difficult cases. And so I just want to say how proud I am of the work that our attorneys in Illinois do to step up to try to fill this gap.
And they definitely do. But what I would also like to add, though, is that coordinating those volunteers and supervising those volunteers and making, having quality control mechanisms in place for the fabulous work these people do takes funding.
And that's why I said I didn't want to minimize your point. It's absolutely right.
Sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our guest Representative Petty for a question. And
thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Harper.
Chairman, for your indulgence and allowing me to address your witnesses in your committee. I greatly appreciate that. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Good. I just want to ask you a couple of questions about the program. I am a graduate of John Marshall Law School myself, so I'm glad to hear, sir, that everything went well for you over there at the clinic. I know that they put in a lot of long hours over there in the clinic, and I'm glad that you were successful in your litigation. I think you've heard, though, that there doesn't appear to be much of an appetite right now in this environment to look out for our most vulnerable people, which is a sad thing. Let alone people who are litigating in the civil courts, not just the criminal courts, but the civil courts, where, as you said, that there is no actual constitutional right to be represented by counsel in those types of scenarios, especially where they're defendants or let alone plaintiffs just fighting for their rights. Having said that, just to get a little bit of clarification about your program, what types of cases do you handle? I'd be curious to know that. Also, what is your total budgetary ask for this year? I don't know where you stand because we've been at an impasse for so long. I don't know if you're just looking for a one-year deal or if you're looking for an extended deal to protect your folks. I think you should speak up. Don't hesitate. I mean, make sure that we know exactly what you need to continue operating. And also, I would want to know, in terms of the cases that you're handling, whether or not your lawyers are actually taking cases that fall under the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Trade Practices Act, where they have the ability to actually recoup attorney's fees against defendants or plaintiffs, well, not necessarily plaintiffs, but defendants who are liable on those types of cases.
Those are great questions. Thank you. The kinds of cases that our grantees take range from handling domestic violence, other family law issues, housing, eviction in the private market and in the public housing space, foreclosure, consumer issues, ranging from student loan issues all the way to predatory lending, little old ladies getting scammed by contractors who, come by and say they're going to fix their roof and then take their money and do nothing. It's a pretty broad range of cases. Also, obviously, in the veteran space, we've got veterans benefits as well as discharge upgrades, which Mr. Henry referenced. We also fund some public health cases through the Legal Counsel for Health Justice, where there's often really medically compromised children, and try to help navigate the system to make sure they're getting the benefits that they need. We have been for the last couple years, the last appropriation was 2015 at $1.4 million for our civil legal aid appropriation. That is also the magic number that is in the Attorney General's budget for the Access to Justice Fund, which is the second appropriation that is funded through the civil filing fee that I mentioned that funds the veterans' work.
Really quickly, 1.4 million for your entire budget?
There are two 1.4 million appropriations.
So 2.8?
Yes.
That's not a lot of money to staff a legal staff and pay the filing fees
No,
and
sir, it is
take
not.
depositions and do the investigation and all the other things that you have to do. That's a minimal amount of money to have available.
I agree, sir. Our high water mark in state funding was $3.5 million. That was cut in half due to state budget issues in 2010, and it took another 20% cut in 2013. So we have been scratching and clawing ever since to try to get the appropriation back up. Nationally, of the 10 most populous states, the average those states spend on civil legal aid is $12.7 million.
12.7 million in all the other states.
The average of the 10 most populous states, of which Illinois is one.
Well, we're number 5, and we're only allocating $1.4 million.
We're number 10 on my list.
Well, I mean, we're number 5 as far as population, as far as
Correct.
GDP, in terms of the size of our state in relation to all the other 49 states. So you're saying that the average, again, was what?
12.7.
12.7 million is what the top 10 states are doing, and we're coming in at 1.4.
Or actually, right now, 0.
And big law firm partners are making about 1.4 a year, correct?
And particularly in Chicago, there is a lot of support from major firms and the pro bono contributions that Representative Anderson mentioned. But private philanthropy is not going to be able to make up the loss of state and federal funding. It's just not possible. So, as I mentioned before, the two major players downstate do not have the resources the Chicago organization have. They don't have the major foundations. They might have a few law firms, but they certainly don't have the footprint that we have here in Chicago. So if there's if there's no state funding and no federal funding, those programs are only going to do emergency cases. I mean, people will have to be bleeding to get any help.
So, and just bear with me just one moment, Mr. Chairman, this will be my last question. So how do you determine, of all the folks that come to you for legal assistance, who do you take and who do you have to turn away?
That's a good question, and we are the grantor, so I'm not actually making those day-by-day horrible decisions, Sophie choice decisions that organizations make. But they each have their priorities, and they try to do triage as much as possible. There are different levels of service as well. I mean, surgery is the in-court representation. The first aid is a legal aid hotline that might be able to provide brief advice, pro se guidance on a much broader basis. So they try to figure out which level of service people need and who needs it most. The folks who are not going to be able to handle something on their own move to the front of the line. But definitely life and death situations like domestic violence always rise to the top.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Nice having you. Representative Harris.
Just help me understand. Your dollars flow through the Attorney General's appropriation. The Attorney General, the constitutional officers did not get appropriations through the General Revenue Fund. Are you all GRF, or are there some other state funds, non-GRF dollars or federal dollars involved?
The dollars that we manage are the GRF that didn't happen last year because we were in her budget. And then this filing fee piece. And those are the two pots of state money that we manage.
So for FY17, for the current fiscal year, what was your request for FY17? Also 1.4 million? So
that was the request the Attorney General put forth.
Say again, I'm sorry.
That was the request the Attorney General put forth in her budget for us.
But none of that came through.
No, but the filing fee
The filing fee is there.
But
I got
general
that.
revenue did not.
But the general revenue did not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Here are no other questions. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next one we have Brad Schumacher from Grand Slam Construction, and we also have, if she's still here, Emma Jones. Okay. Mr. Schumacher, thank you for your patience.
You're welcome. Oh, ow. All right, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Brad Schumacher. It's actually Eagle Environmental Consultants. I've been born and raised in Illinois, and I've been running an environmental consulting company for over 20 years. Because of the budget impasse, I've had to let go numerous people, split with my business partner, and had to cash in my 401k plan to keep business afloat. I'm appalled and embarrassed with our state politicians and the governor's inaction to meet halfway on a budget. It's closing down businesses, and it's directly affecting the environment by not paying for cleanups with $70 million currently in the Lust Fund, unused. The fund needs to be appropriated by the House and the Senate and approved by the governor. My business relies on this fund and has previously funded 95% of my business operations. I once had an office in Springfield that has since closed, forcing me to lay off 10 employees. This impasse needs to end. Without a balanced budget and no Lust Fund, I will be forced to go out of business. It is time that Bruce Rauner, our governor, to represent the people of Illinois and come to the table to come up with a balanced budget. This year's impasse is hurting the environment, education of our children, the elderly, and businesses all across the state. Thanks.
Mr. Schumacher, can you explain a little bit? So you do business for the state? Okay.
The leaking underground storage tank fund. So
the leaking, okay.
We work with all the underground storage tank issues. There's a leaking underground storage tank fund that helps pay for those cleanups. Basically, the fund is set up to protect the groundwater, so we don't have contaminated groundwater. If we ever had an issue with Lake Michigan and we'd lose all the suburban Chicago water, we'd have to go to our.
Can you speak to the microphone?
We'd have to go to our, local cities to get that drinking water. And obviously, if those drinking waters, those are contaminated, then, we're out of our drinking water source. So that's what basically the fund is set up for, is to protect the state of Illinois' groundwater for future use.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is non-GRF, right?
Correct. There's approximately $70 million in the fund right now. It comes from a gas tax, 3/10 of a cent. So the fund is healthy. It's there. The stopgap budget they have been funding, but last year, prior to 2015, they did not pay out of the fund for a year.
But it's one of these issues, again, the money's there. It's just we need appropriation authority to make sure that the funds are released and you can get paid.
Yes, sir.
How far behind is the state paying you?
They owe me at least $450,000.
It's pretty significant for a small business.
And it was up to, when they weren't paying, it was up to over $2 million.
Really?
In 2015, yes,
Okay.
when they weren't paying at all.
Okay. Representative Harris, question?
Mr. Schumacher, you're not the only person who has had an issue with the leaking underground storage tank fund, and as you correctly say, the dollars in that fund come off of a few tenths of a cent that we level on gasoline sales. But I thought that we appropriated, and there was a period of time when we did not appropriate the Lust Fund, and you and others, it was disgraceful because the dollars were there and you couldn't get paid because we, the General Assembly, didn't pass an appropriation. But I thought last year we passed an appropriation which authorized expenditures from the LUS fund. Is that not the case? Are you not getting paid now?
No, but it ends June 30th. So
right,
basically,
and so it ends June 30th. So your situation is similar, as an example, to what we heard about LIHEAP, which is that
correct.
If we pass an appropriation separate from the general revenue fund, if we pass an appropriation that says the comptroller has the authority to write checks off of the leaking underground storage tank fund,
right.
your bills will get paid as they should be,
correct.
because the money's in the fund. You just need that appropriation,
yes, sir.
For the fund. Okay, just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, this is one of those examples where we're causing unnecessary pain.
Yes.
It's just, unfortunately, gets caught up, and we have the so-called hostages. Hopefully, that won't be the case for next fiscal year. We know the funds are there. As we heard earlier from the LIHEAP folks, it's just a matter of just appropriating those funds to make sure you can keep running your business, keep employing people, do what you're supposed to do. Plus, it's a safety health issue as well.
Correct.
Follow-up, Representative Harris.
Yeah, let me if I may make a follow-up, because you bring up a good point here. Yes, we appropriated the dollars this year, but we did not appropriate the dollars the previous year. And I forget the gentleman's name. He's from, I want to say St. Charles, that also had an...
That's my ex-business partner,
okay,
Bob Ranguso.
Right, and
yeah.
he had an office in Springfield. You had
right.
to lay people off.
Yep.
I mean, you had folks coming in from out of state that were doing the work that you couldn't do because you weren't getting reimbursed.
Correct.
I mean, and the reason I mention that is because it highlights the downstream consequences of this, which is you had probably, I think the figure was like 20-some employees.
Yes,
You're
sir.
now down to 10 or so. So those
Right.
are 14 people who are now no longer working in the state of Illinois, not because the dollars weren't in the fund, but because we didn't do what we should do, pass the appropriation and have it signed, and pass the appropriation and give you the ability to get paid.
Correct.
So clearly that hurts Illinois overall. The general revenue fund aside,
Sure.
for those funds where the dollars are there and all we need is an appropriation, you're right on track. We need to make sure that appropriation occurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I concur with Representative Harris. I mean, there's no reason why we need to cause unnecessary pain if we don't have to, and the money's there. So we will attempt to do that collectively, and I appreciate you coming before us again, and we'll wait to see what happens by the end of June.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank all the members for being here. Beautiful day out there, and we'll recess until the call of the chair. We recess, but please go ahead.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a closing statement. And my colleague, Representative Anderson, referred to this earlier, and that is that the minority leader, in conjunction with one of the leaders, Republican leaders in the Senate, offered ideas today at a press conference on how we might move forward. I haven't seen all the details of that. Hopefully, what the minority leader, as well as the senator from the Republican side of the aisle in the Senate, have offered will be a way forward so that we can resolve this just awful situation that we were in and or are in. And I hope that that does indeed provide a path that we can move forward on. Thank you very much, and thank you for your courtesy during the hearing.
Thank you again, Representative Harrison. Again, thank all of you. And for the second time, we'll recess to call the chair. Thank you. By the way, before I forget, so I did ask Emma Jones. Okay, Ms. Jones, will you please come forward?
Good afternoon. My name is Imogene Jones, and I came to speak on behalf of the CPS and the problems with the water issues at the school. But I've heard so much sitting here today, I'm impressed. There's a lot of issues that I could talk about, but I won't. All I ask for, pass a budget. Pass a budget, because we are suffering. CPS, elderly like me, are suffering. Please, you all, get a budget passed.
That's such a great way to close, and I agree with you. I think that's the plan. That's what we want to do, and You're from Chicago?
Yes.
Again, and I represent the suburbs, although I was born in Chicago. And I can tell you that whatever we do, we should do for all the residents of the state of Illinois.
Exactly.
And we should not be driven by not liking one section of the state or not, or another. But I appreciate your patience, and I think it's a great way to close. And the ultimate goal is to pass the budget. And if now we heard today that there are other non-GRF funds that we should be able to appropriate to minimize the pain. But I think from this committee, I can speak for all of us, that's the plan. And you have some very good people up here on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, that I can attest to them when they say they really want to do the right thing. So, and if you believe in prayers, those are always welcome.
I just need a budget pass. Please, guys, get us a budget pass.
Thank you very much. And again, for the third time, we'll recess to the call of the chair.
Thank you.